Sony has done a lot of damage over these past few weeks when it comes to physical media, but it turns out they're not done. More is coming, and not only that, but according to some CEOs, the removal of physical media doesn't matter, and I'll also get into Stop Destroying Games and how they've secured a major win later on in the video too, and how Nintendo has now gained a foothold thanks to Sony and even Xbox's mistakes. But firstly, from Kid Guru, GameStop CEO flat out said it doesn't matter if Sony goes digital only. Ryan Cohen, who's the CEO of GameStop, said this during an interview with Bloomberg Tech. It doesn't matter at all. Software, it mattered in the past. Software today makes up less than 12% of the business, and collectibles makes up over half the business, so it's totally irrelevant. This is disheartening to hear, since I used to go to GameStop, or I guess EB Games as it was called here in Canada, for years myself. I bought practically all my physical games from there, from the PS1 all the way up to the PS5 and then some, including all of my consoles. But when you go into an EB Games or GameStop now, sure, yeah, they have physical discs for games, I guess, to sell, but the vast majority of a GameStop is, collectible items and stuff like trading card packs for, say, Pokemon and the like, because that's where the money is these days. Ironically, though, this does actually mean then that physical media matters to GameStop, since, their entire business model is still about selling physical, tangible goods to consumers. But games now don't matter? That's honestly demoralizing. Although, as Kid Guru shows here, GameStop's endgame is to buy eBay for $56 billion because they're seeing where the market is going. And they think making money off every sale of a vintage card or Pokemon and stuff getting sold is where the real money is, I guess. But all this tells me is that GameStop doesn't view games as media that they want to stay alive, which feels antithetical to their entire operation. But as PlayStation Lifestyle says here, people are not giving up, because on the new Wolverine PS5 trailer, which is a whole CGI thing, that game's entire comment section is nothing but people plaguing Sony with demands for physical discs to return. And even more stuff has happened, according to instantgaming.com is seen here. PlayStation France is allegedly censoring Twitch users on their streams that spam comments regarding physical media returning too. One user as seen there showed how they were banned on Twitch from viewing PlayStation France's streams because they were demanding for physical discs. Another user as seen here claimed to have said something similar. They also got banned. This doesn't seem to be a widespread issue, but the fact that it is one at all is still concerning. But when it comes to UK retail groups, they also believe that what Sony is doing is actually against progress, as seen here from Kotaku. The group at the heart of this pushback is the ERA, or Entertainment Retailers Association, over in the UK. They spoke to the game business, where they said this: PlayStation's announcement that major games will no longer be available on disc is a triumph of corporate convenience over consumer choice. Every year, millions of gamers still choose to buy physical copies because they value true ownership. A disc can be shared with family, traded in, collected, preserved, and crucially, still played years from now. A download license offers none of those freedoms. They're right, it doesn't. What's more concerning for the ERA is that they represent many major retailers in the UK, like even Amazon Game and more. As I highlighted there, 45% of their physical games sold in the UK last year were just from PS4 and 5. So this is a huge blow to another major group in the UK, with Sony doing what they're doing. Because if the disc is not there, people will be forced to buy digital, so no ownership and no more physical games media. There was more in the report, let me read it too. The ERA consumer data shows that 25% of people under 25 use discs for gaming, and the total UK disc-based games market was valued at over 300 million euros in 2025, demonstrating that there remains a substantial and committed audience for boxed games. Retailers see this demand every day. Physical games continue to bring people into shops and give consumers real value through gifting, collecting, and resale. Yes, again, the fact that GameStop CEO of all people disregards that is sad to see, especially when their business is made up of things like Pokemon cards, right? That proves that physical media still matters. Really, if physical sales are down, then there only needs to be an incentive to buy these games physically than to make them more alluring, right? Obviously, owning the game should be enough of a reason, but if that's not enough, companies like GameStop for years have also sold exclusive pre-order bonuses in-game that are only available through their retail chains. The CEO of the ERA even had more to say. The industry should be embracing every legitimate way consumers want to buy games, not narrowing their choices. Digital distribution has transformed gaming and is hugely popular, but it should complement physical formats, not replace them. Consumers deserve the freedom to choose how they buy their entertainment. Removing discs doesn't represent progress, it simply removes choice. That's bad for gamers, bad for retailers, and ultimately bad for the long-term health and preservation of our games industry. I really couldn't have put it better myself, because that's really what it comes down to. I would take it a step further and say that the removal of physical media in all aspects is actually anti-art, because when you go to someone's house or even their room, right, they cover their rooms and their houses or whatever in what they love. For me, I have Final Fantasy merchandise on my shelves. I have comic books sealed and signed. I have statues from games that I love and plushies from other games like Hollow Knight or Pokemon even. I also keep my video games, not all of them because I have so many physical games I have in like boxes, but I do keep some of them on my shelf. Some of those games are still sealed, others aren't, but the point is to display the things that you love. It's about conveying your identity through the stuff that you enjoy, and I think what this ends up doing is removing that attachment to the material world because they, as in these companies, want to save money. But like I keep saying, anytime I see Sony do something, it brings me back to how Nintendo does it instead, because Nintendo's now technically the only first-party company in games that is actually embracing physical media. As Nintendo Live said here in an opinion piece, Nintendo is gaining ground and good reputation due to Sony and Xbox just decimating the games industry for seemingly no reason now. As Nintendo Live said here, who cares to pay $1,000 plus for a new Xbox or PlayStation just to play the same games you already can on current gen hardware, but maybe they look a bit better. Some will, sure, yes, but the majority are not going to see a reason to do that. Nintendo Live said it right here, when the opposition can't pull their pants up without soiling themselves, just standing upright on the field looks pretty handy. But I think how they put it here really puts things into perspective. Yet compared to Sony and Microsoft bending institutional knowledge by sacking great swaths of their workforce, greedy Nintendo, the company that slapped an $80 price tag on the latest Mario Kart, now finds itself positioned as one of the good guys. How the hell did that happen? In the current climate though, there's simply no competition. Nintendo presents as the most ethical candidate on the platform holder ballot right now. The only real choice for conscientious console gamers anxious to support the industry, its people, and its future. Unfortunately, that is kind of true now. Objectively, Xbox is sort of like Sony too, right? I mean, in Xbox's case, you own even less technically, because their entire business model is built around Game Pass, which you most definitely do not own the games there, and they are obviously removed routinely every month to make way for new games. Nintendo, however, now is the only platform going forward where you can actually own your games if you buy them physically. Sure, yes, third-party publishers at first were doing the game card idea, some still are, where the game is digital, the key card unlocks it, but this has started to become something many publishers are realizing is a bad idea for the Switch 2, well, depends I guess, but the majority of games that do well on Switch or Switch 2 are full games on the cart physically, like every Nintendo first-party game pretty much in existence available there, or for example, third-party games like Cyberpunk 2077. Unfortunately, some games are key cards still, like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, maybe because the game is too big, I don't know, but again, most games people support are indeed physically on there, and that's the point. It's wild how Nintendo raised prices on games, yet they are now seen as the least unethical of the big three now, because the other two decided to ruin their entire public images by doing things that were seen as even worse in comparison, layoffs and all the other things too. As Shantaro Furukawa, that's the president of Nintendo, said here in an investor QA on screen, I'm not going to read it because it's very long, but basically he says that Nintendo is doing well because they foster their talent and cultivate them over years, so that they become masters at making games for Nintendo and more consistently too. The Nintendo CEO said more is seen here in the bold text, which says, "We believe it is important to set appropriate compensation levels in order to maintain an environment where employees can take on the challenge of creating new entertainment without fear of failure." You see, the problem is Sony doesn't really do this, nor does Xbox. They instead have a more westernized mindset in terms of how they go about doing these things, and it ultimately makes their employees feel less like long-term investments but short-term gains instead. This is why Nintendo keeps releasing consistent first-party releases like all of the time. Looking at it logically, Switch 2 came out last year, as we all know, right? Mario Kart World was first. Then 2 weeks later, Donkey Kong Bonanza came out. Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, that was out in November 2025. Kirby Air Riders, November as well. There's Pokemon Legends ZA in October 2025. Super Mario Jamboree came out as well. Metroid Prime 4 in December. So in the first 6 months, Switch 2 had 8 or so first-party Switch 2 only games. In 2026, they had Mario Tennis Fever, Pokemon Pokopia, Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, and Star Fox so far. And they still got more on the way, like an Ocarina of Time remake for 2026 as well, which is going to make them a lot of money. So if you combine all of those games plus the Switch 2 versions of many Switch 1 games, it then balloons the first-party lineup on Switch 2 to well over 20 games plus. Without that upgrade, it's still closer to 10 games or so. Again, in like a year. And what does Sony have in 2026 exclusive-wise? There's 3 games that came out. Marathon, which flopped, Saros, which also flopped, and Wolverine. That's it. That's not enough coming out first-party-wise from Sony to justify owning their console, if you ask me. Nintendo already has more exclusive games that are physical on the cart that are available in 1 year than Sony has released for PS5 in 6 years. When you objectively look at what Sony has released on PS5, it's barely even 10 first-party exclusive games. Here's this list from Google. Astro's Playroom, well, that's a demo, doesn't really count. Demon's Souls and Last of Us are just remakes, so that doesn't really count either. Death Stranding 2 was multi-platform. Days Gone Remastered also doesn't count because that was on PS4. Destruction All-Stars would have counted, but that's already taken offline and you can't play it anymore. So that then leaves Returnal, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Spider-Man 2, Saros, Ghost of Yotei, and Wolverine eventually. But even then, that list is also not legit because many of those games are on PC as well. Ratchet & Clank, Returnal, Spider-Man 2, like it's ridiculous. Meaning the only actual PS5 games that are only on the PS5 that you can play there are Demon's Souls Remake, Astrobot, Saros, Wolverine when it comes out, and Ghost of Yotei in 6 whole years. And I guess the Astro Playroom demo, if you want to count that, which I wouldn't, but you do you. But I gotta be real, right? It's pathetic. It really is. I stand by my statement that the PS5 generation has easily been the worst singular generation of Sony first-party content in a very long time. Not only are you not getting many first-party games, but what does come out is either rehash stuff you already played, or stuff where it doesn't hold a candle to what came before, or it's multi-platform, or it's on PS4 already, like God of War Ragnarok. It's not even a PS5 game. You can play that on PS4, right? That also serves the point. Like Wolverine, okay, that's to be determined since as of this video being made, it's not out yet, but the point is Sony removing physical media, closing down the vast majority of their Japanese-led development studios, and focusing so heavily on their westernized studios instead has been, no joke, nothing short of a disaster. As if all of that wasn't bad enough, as GameSpot reported here, Sony is also eliminating physical sales of anime via Crunchyroll as well, which they own. Crunchyroll revealed via their FAQ where they said this: the store will be dropping much of its current stock and transitioning to a brand new shopping experience that will be available exclusively for Mega and Ultimate fans, subscription tiers. Instead of physical discs, the Crunchyroll store will focus on collectibles, curated drops, and limited release products inspired by the anime series you love. So they're pay-gating people's access to buy limited edition items inspired by various anime via their higher subscription tiers. I wish I was kidding. As people on r/anime were saying, as you can see there, it's all being done so that Sony and Crunchyroll can optimize on selling less physical media, but instead selling higher priced, more sought after items by manipulating people via FOMO, or fear of missing out. That's a vicious cycle where people who pay the most will then have access to then pay more for things that are being price gouged in the first place due to rarity. This entire thing is anti-consumer, but Sony's still doing it. And this is what I mean when I say this entire generation of PlayStation, or really Sony in general, is just the worst overall it's ever been. Every decision is being done to control more and give you less. That's really what it comes down to. Like that petition for Sony to reconsider physical media has also reached, as seen here, 32,000 signatures. I'll leave a link in the description box again if you'd like to sign it yourself, but as you can see, none of this is good and Sony is still clearly refusing to listen. But circling back to Nintendo life and them speaking on how Sony and Xbox are just destroying their goodwill over sheer greed, the truth of the matter is the more Sony continues down this path, the more people are going to vacate to places like Nintendo or Steam. As they say here, the only one of the big three truly investing in its people and the future of the industry is Nintendo. PlayStation and Xbox management bang on about what fans deserve while eradicating the work environments and cultures necessary to deliver to those fans. Exactly this. No wonder Sony doesn't have great games coming out, because they're turning more and more every day into Microsoft, when they should be turning more into Nintendo. Not fully, like, I'm not going to say fully, but they do need to take a play out of Nintendo's book regardless. Either way, if you ask me, the way that things are going, Sony has destroyed too much goodwill this generation. They're focusing on nothing but trying to streamline the avenues to their pockets, and if places like Nintendo embrace physical in the future, I think Sony's going to lose a lot of business. Because really, what does Sony have without their first-party games? The games that are also available elsewhere? That's your big selling point. These days, you need reasons for people to stay. On Steam, everything is just objectively cheaper and more convenient, so they win by default. Xbox is figuring themselves out, and Nintendo has a very strong first-party synergy. Plus, at least when they do their Nintendo subscription service, it results in emulators for N64, GameCube, and more. All Nintendo needs is a trophy system, and PlayStation is cooked. Sony is not investing enough into their backlog either. The entire PS3 generation is practically unplayable, unless you stream it, which is also not ideal. They don't have a dedicated handheld that can play games natively, unlike Xbox with the Ally, or Steam with the Steam Deck, or Nintendo with just the Switch 1 and 2 obviously, and the Portal just streams games, so it doesn't really count. The whole thing is a mess, right? And I really want to drive it home how important and crucial it is right now that what Sony is going to be doing is going to be Nintendo's gain. People are watching as games get delisted, storefronts like PS Vita or PS3 are closing down, and they're witnessing publishers revoking access to content almost every other week. And it's becoming clear that if you don't actually own what you buy, why are you paying for it? I get it that Sony is pushing for this digital future, because they believe the PSN store is a massive centerpiece to their ecosystem, but due to how it's all going, Sony's ecosystem then becomes the dependent that we all then have to kneel to. This in turn makes Nintendo actually to some degree then seem like a safe haven, because Nintendo hasn't entered themselves as some champions of physical media, yet that's exactly what's going to happen anyways. You walk into almost any store right now that sells physical games media. What is going to be one of the biggest sections? Right, it's Nintendo by a long shot. Amiibos, everything. It's because Nintendo dominates that way. The collectors know it, parents even know that, and because of this, Nintendo cartridges then become one of the last examples of real physical ownership in the console space, gaming in total. And that does matter a lot because people will become exhausted by subscriptions, right? Companies may think that's not the case, but then if so, why hasn't Game Pass grown in years then? People will get tired of digital restrictions and temporary access. Nintendo instead is going to offer something refreshingly simple. You buy a game, you put the cartridge in, and guess what? You get to play it. It's a concept that's so absurdly basic, yet it wins every single time, but in today's industry, basic has pretty much become revolutionary now. The gaming industry is oftentimes underestimating that physical demand. Investors may see it as, inefficient maybe, but what they don't realize is that through physical ownership, that is how people build emotional connections to what they play and what they love. Collectors don't buy software, okay? They want to build their libraries. They want to preserve gaming history to a degree. And what we need to realize is a shelf full of games is not plastic. That is permanence, it's security, it's history, it's proof that your hobby isn't entirely dependent on the goodwill of some multinational corporation. Nintendo understands this far better than many of its competitors, and that will happen is that physical collectors increasingly will gravitate towards platforms that are still going to respect that relationship, and many people are beginning to view physical media as insurance, and they should. It's not because they hate digital, but because they don't trust corporations to preserve gaming history indefinitely, and can you really blame them? This industry has provided countless examples showing exactly why that trust has eroded time and again. The biggest mistake that Sony could be making right now is assuming that consumers don't care about any of this, because they clearly do. The success of physical collector's editions, right? The popularity of retro gaming is at an all-time high right now. The demand for preservation is crazy. That continued strength of physical Nintendo releases that keep selling out all of the time, all of these trends point towards the same conclusion. Players, whether PlayStation wants to admit it or not, still value ownership, perhaps more than ever. So the reason why Nintendo is benefiting from this trend isn't because Nintendo is perfect, they're not, but because Nintendo understands that physical ownership still matters. It's something you can keep. It's yours forever. You don't lose it just because some company decides to change their policies. Because at the end of the day, a cartridge on your shelf doesn't require someone else's permission for you to play it. And that's becoming one of the most valuable features in gaming, and that's why I think Nintendo is going to reap the whirlwind while Sony drowns in it. I don't want to end this video though on a sad note, so at least there is some sort of victory. So Stop Destroying Games was at war with European officials over the right to use VPNs. And now it turns out SKG actually won this battle, as seen here from their official Reddit. As seen there, SKG has signed a letter opposing the UK government's push to ban VPNs, and with this victory, VPNs are now still viable within the UK. They've signed this letter with other groups, like Reporters Without without borders, Mozilla, and more, and this is a big victory against the players and just users of the internet over what the UK is trying to do, because they're now able to still access the internet the way that they want to, which is insane that we even have this as like an issue in the first place, but that's how bad this is all getting. The reason why this matters is seen here is because this use of VPNs would also block functionality with Linux-based ecosystems as well as modding tools and private servers, which obviously, if you're in the business of keeping games alive, you kind of need those to be there. Because of this letter being signed, now it'll be harder for these opposers to remove access to private servers and ensure things like Discord even and more can be used more freely. It's all a mess, but it's good that SKG is working with other groups to at least change things, otherwise we all lose. This stop destroying games thing has now evolved into encompassing the internet at large to save as well. It's all important, it all needs to be fixed, and while sure, I guess this doesn't exactly pertain to what I'm talking about in this video, I don't really care. We all needed some good news, right? And I wanted to share good news, so there you go. Things are working out at least to some degree. But what do you think? Let me know. Subscribe if you like to, and please everyone, take care of yourselves. Things may seem dark right now, but just try to find joy in life. We all need it. Keep your chins up, and let's just keep on moving.